Welcome to the HTML5 project training series. I'm Mike King, your host, and in this tutorial we're actually going to do our 3D transforms. This is part 8 of this series. I think we're going to probably have one more part after this one, but in this particular part of the tutorials we're going to build a 3D carousel. So CSS3 allows us to format our elements using 3D transformations, and we've gone over that over the last few tutorials. We've actually built some pretty cool 3D items using CSS3, HTML5, and a little bit of JavaScript. So in this tutorial we're going to build a 5-slide carousel application using the 3D transforms that we've been studying over the last few tutorials. And it's actually going to, again, just add some more information to your tool set on how to use these transforms in the development of your HTML pages. So let's go ahead and move into our development environment and demonstrate how we actually build 3D carousels using HTML5 and CSS3. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize my presentation and let's get into our development environment. I'm going to go ahead and make certain that I got my Apache server is up and running, which it is. That's very good. Go ahead and minimize Apache server. I want to go ahead and bring up Google Chrome, which will be the browser that I'm going to use for this particular demonstration, and Sublime Text 2, and I actually have my start file loaded for this particular demonstration, and we're going to go ahead and build. This is going to be our 3D carousel application. And this is actually going to be the 5-slide that we're going to build this time. We're actually going to do 2 of these. We're actually going to build a 5 and a 9. We'll start with the 5 because it's a little bit easier, then we'll get into our 9. So let's go ahead and save that change. Now the first thing, with all that we've learned in our previous exercises, we're now ready to tackle building a carousel application using CSS3 and HTML5. So similar to what we've done with our cube tutorial, we'll be using the utilities, JavaScript with Modernizer, and a carousel JavaScript file that I created for this exercise that's actually going to be able to walk us through and pick up those mouse clicks and walk us through the selections inside of our slides. So let's get to building our carousel. So front-end developers have a myriad of choices when it comes to content carousels inside of HTML. Now that we have 3D capabilities in our browsers with the addition of the CSS3 transforms, why not take a shot at creating an actual 3D carousel using the transforms from CSS3? We'll start with a relatively easy example. We'll begin with a 5-panel carousel and build the basic content of our interface. And while we're doing it, you'll get some additional experience in working with the new elements in the CSS3 transforms. So that's the purpose of all these exercises that we've been doing up to this point, is to get you comfortable with the many different elements that are now available in the CSS3 transforms and how we can use them to make our web applications or our web pages much more interactive by our users, and actually much more enjoyable for our users, because there's just so much more that we can do now. Okay, so let's start with a basic HTML5 page. I've got my start file opened. I'm going to go ahead and do a save as. Let's go ahead and save this as example 1. We're going to do this just as we've been doing with our previous ones, example_1.html. I'm going to go back into my web root. Let's go ahead and load that page up. Not quite certain where that came from. And now what I want to do, because all we have here now is our actual title tag for our tab. All right, so let's go ahead and start. We've already got our basic content in there. I want to add some additional information into the head section of my document. Right below my character set, I want to go ahead and add a meta tag in here for our viewport. Like we talked about in the last demonstration, I want to go ahead and put a viewport in here with my initial scale at 1.0. User scalable is turned off so they can't zoom in and out with the page. And I'm basically doing that just to kind of keep everything nice and neat in the way we're doing this, and I don't have to make the slides themselves for the carousel responsive, because it would actually be quite difficult. Actually not quite difficult, but it would add a lot of complexity to what we're doing for the demonstration, so I don't want to do that. I also want to go ahead and add an H2 inside my body element. And this is going to be one of 2 carousels. We're actually going to do 2 carousels in this demonstration. I'll actually include another tutorial, part 9. We're actually going to do one that's a little more complex, and we're going to add a little bit more things to the carousel itself. So let's go ahead and save this file. This is a good time to pause if you want to go ahead and type in and catch up where we're at. Not a lot to discuss with this code. We've actually added our character set, we've added our viewport, we've given the actual document a title inside our head section, and then inside the body element I've just added an H2, which actually gives us carousel 1, and if we refresh this in our body, in our browser window, you can actually see our H2 now inside the browser itself. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add the 5 panels that we're going to use, the HTML for those 5 panels, inside our document. So I'm going to come right down below my H2 heading, and I'm actually going to build a section, and I'm going to give it a class name of container, and then inside that section I'm going to have a div with an ID of carousel, and then inside that div I'm actually going to include 5 divs for our panels. And I'm just going to have these things numbered as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I've got menu 1, menu 2, menu 3, menu 4, and menu 5. And those are actually what we're going to be turning into the carousel slides themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. Again, the key to remember here is I've got my section, which is my container, which will contain the entire section. Remember, when we use that perspective we talked about in the previous tutorials, we want that to be in a container so it impacts the children. And that's why we've got our container set up. Then we've set up a carousel inside of a div. And then inside that div, we've got 5 child divs, which are actually holding our menus 1, 2, 3, and 4 for our changes. I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes and refresh our browser. You can actually see the menus now in the browser window. Good time to pause if you want to go ahead and type all that in. And then we're actually going to be starting to build now. We're going to actually get into our options and our navigation system for our carousel. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do save as. I'm going to go ahead and save this as example number 2 inside our exercise chapter. And again, this is just so that we can keep different versions of our file. I'm going to go back in here now. Let's go ahead and refresh and load up example 2. Now what I want to add is I want to add the buttons in the navigation for the buttons that we're going to actually use to work through the carousel as it moves about these different slides that we're going to build. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this. I'm going to come right below where I've closed my container section. And I'm going to add another section that's going to be called my options section. This is actually where we're going to include the navigation that's going to allow us to navigate through these different elements inside the carousel. So what I've got is I've got a section that I've called options, my opening section element, given it an ID of options. Then inside there I've got a nav element. And inside my nav element, I have 2 buttons. One has an ID of previous and one has an ID of next. And then I've got a data increment equal -1 and a data increment equal 1. And that's based on my JavaScript file. You'll see that in a few minutes. Let's go ahead and save those changes. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up a little bit. This is the navigation we're actually going to use for the carousel itself. Good time to pause if you want to go ahead and type that in. Now what I want to do is I want to add a link to our document, because unlike our previous examples, I'm actually going to use an external style sheet for this, because there are quite a bit of styles that we'll be implementing inside this particular document to make our carousel function correctly. So up in the head section of my document, I'm actually going to put a link that's going to link us to this external style sheet. And you'll notice I've added a link given a relationship style sheet. The type is text/CSS. And then I've got an href with a carousel.css, which is actually going to be the CSS file in the same directory as my example_2.html. So I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. I'm going to go ahead and refresh my browser window. You can actually see now our buttons are on the stage, or in our browser, I should say. And we've got the link that we've added for our carousel CSS file. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create a new text document inside my text editor. So I'm going to select new file. You can create a new text file in whatever text editor you happen to be using, but I want to do a save as. And I want to save this as carousel, carousel.css. This is going to be the CSS style sheet where we're going to put all the styles that are going to pertain to this carousel that we're going to build. So now I've got that carousel.css in the root directory. So it's in the same directory as my HTML document file. And you'll notice here that I've got it in the same directory because I have no directory structure. I'm just going directly to the href to the file inside my link. So now let's begin to add a little bit of styling to our application. The first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and do some styling on our body element. So I'm going to go into the carousel.css file, and I'm going to add some styling to the body element. I'm going to give it a font family of Helvetica Arial Sans Serif. I am going to put it WebKit prefix on my text size adjust none, and again, that's for my zoom attribute. Remember, we actually set this up here where we had the initial sales set for our viewport. So it's not viewable. We don't want our text sizes to adjust. I'm going to give my text color, my body, a dark gray, which is that pound 333. I'm going to put a max width of 720 pixels and a min width of 400 pixels. My margin top and bottom is going to be 0 pixels. Left and right is going to be auto, which is going to center our document or center our body element in the HTML viewport for the browser window. And I'm going to add a padding of 10 pixels all around the body element. So I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes, refresh my browser window, and you can see some changes that already occurred based on what we've got set. Good time to pause if you need to go ahead and type that in. The next thing I want to do in my carousel.css file is I want to go ahead and add some styling for my options. And if you remember, we actually have an ID of options down here. And inside that section, we're holding our button elements. So let's go ahead and do some default styling for those options. I'm going to come down right below my body elements. And again, I'm going to go to the ID of options. I'm going to make the position relative to its parent, which is the body element. I'm going to give it a z-index of 100, so it's always going to be on top of whatever could fall behind it. Remember, the default z-index is 0. The higher the number, the closer to the top of the stack. And my margin bottom is going to be 40 pixels, so I'm going to force it 40 pixels from the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and save those changes, refresh my browser window. Shouldn't see any impact yet. Good time to pause if you want to go ahead and type that in. And now the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and do some styling for our nav element. So right below my options, I'm going to come down a couple lines and paste in my tags for my nav. Actually, you know what? I want to go ahead and clean up my formatting here too. I didn't notice that. My formatting is actually off a little bit. So I'm just going to get things cleaned up so it's better formatted for us to follow along. And actually, we should always follow proper formatting. Just makes things easier to read as a developer. So I'm just going to clean up all the formatting. Get my closing brace. There we go. And I've got my width. With my nav element, it's going to be 250 pixels. My margin is going to be 0, and my right and left is going to be auto. So again, that's going to format. What we're doing now is we're actually setting the width of this nav element. And if you remember from our HTML document, that's the nav element right here that's containing our buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. Good time to pause if you need to type that in. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the browser window, and now you should actually see that move to the center. And again, it's based on the fact that we've given it a width of 250 pixels, and we've set the margin top and bottom of 0, with an auto left and right, which centers it on our available space inside of our browser window. And that's why you'll see it stay centered based on how we've got the browser window positioned. I'm going to go ahead and save all these changes, and now we're going to continue styling our document. All right, so we can keep different versions of our files. I'm going to go ahead and select my example underscore 2. I'm going to do a save as. Let's go ahead and save this as example underscore 3.html again, so we have different versions of the files as we're working our way through these. And the carousel, I want to make sure I'm going to do save as, just make sure I've got this saved in my root, which I do. Good. Okay. Make sure we have both those files. Next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and style the buttons themselves. So I'm going to come down right below my nav element, because I actually want to add some styling to our buttons. You can see they don't look quite the same. So I'm going to come right down there. I'm going to say button. I want to give them a width of 70 pixels and a font size of 12 pixels, which is pretty standard for buttons. I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes, refresh my browser window. Now we have two buttons that are the same size and the same font size, so it looks a little bit better. Good time to pause if you want to type that in, because now the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to start working on the container. And if you remember, the container is what actually holds, or is going to hold, our carousel. So now we're actually going to work on the styling for this area right here, the container class itself. So I'm going to come down right below, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this above my nav element, because actually this should be above the nav element. Not that it makes a difference, but I actually like doing my styling in the flow of the document. And there's actually quite a few developers that do that. They'll actually set up their styling based on the document flow, so it's easier for them to find things in their style sheet. And what I mean by that is if you look at our document flow, I come into my body element, I have my H2, and then I immediately come into the section called container. So I'd actually want that to be the same way. I'd actually want my container to be right after my body element. And it just makes it easier to follow the flow if we follow the flow of our document elements inside of our CSS file. It makes it easier to find things in the CSS file itself. So what I've done with the container now, I've actually set up the container width of 210 pixels. I've given it a height of 140 pixels. I've set the position relative, so it's going to be relative to its parent element. In this case, that's the body element. I set the margin 0 top, auto left and right, 50 pixels on the bottom, and I've put a border, a 2 pixel solid dark gray border around the container element itself. And actually, because it's the container element and we know that it's going to contain 3D child elements, I've set the perspective at 200 pixels. Let's go ahead and save all those changes and refresh our browser window, and you'll actually see now what our border looks like for this container, where our slides are actually going to be centered in the container itself. Now, we haven't formatted those yet, but we're getting close. Remember, when we change the perspective, we actually view the carousel in different ways as we change this perspective. We're going to come back and actually modify this so you can see what impact that has on the carousel itself inside of our browser window. That's one of the things we're going to play with as we get our settings set. The next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and add the styling for the carousel. And if you go back to our HTML document, remember we've got our carousel, we've got an ID of carousel, and that's where we're actually going to style the slides themselves inside that carousel element. So I'm going to come right below my container, add a couple lines, and I want to address that ID of carousel. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say, okay, I want my carousel to be a width of 100%. And keep in mind now, the carousel is a child of the container. So whatever I've set the width and height here, if I put 100%, that's what the carousel is going to assume, because it's assuming its dimensions of its parent element based on the fact that I've told it it's 100% of its parent. So I get the width and height of 100%. The position is absolute, which is going to put it in the upper left-hand corner of the containing element. I've got a transform translate Z of -288. We're actually going to play with some of these as we work along in the exercise, so you can see what this translate Z actually does. I can give some good examples with the carousel as to what translate Z actually is on that three-dimensional plane. The transform style I got set to preserve 3D, and the transition in this particular case I've got to set to 1/2 of 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes, refresh my browser window, and the only thing you should notice here is that everything seemed to move backwards. And you'll notice our menu seemed to move back, and the reason it did that is because of this translate Z, this -288, and we'll talk more about that as we get into styling the actual slides themselves. The carousel ID is the parent element of all the divs, so I want to point out that this ID is the parent element of all our different divs inside our carousel. As we discussed in earlier tutorials, we're adding the preserve 3D to the parent element of all these selections. So keep in mind, that's why we've assigned this carousel the preserve 3D and this translate Z. It's the parent of all the slides that are coming next, and we want to make certain that they maintain their 3D perspective. So now this is where we're setting those up. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to do some styling now on these individual divs. We're going to style them as a group, and then we're going to get in and style them individually. The first thing let's do, let's go ahead and style them as a group. All the things that are going to be common amongst those slides. So I'm going to come down right below my carousel, and now I'm going to target the carousel with a div element. So if you look at our HTML document, we're targeting now any carousel, the ID of carousel, that has a div element inside of it. So we actually have 5 of these that we're going to target now with these styles. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to tell them to display as a block element. I'm going to give them a position of absolute, so they're absolute positioned in their parent, just like our carousel was, so too will our divs be. I'm giving them a width of 186 pixels. And if you think about what we're doing, remember the width and height that we set here, 210 and 140? So I'm giving these a width of 186. I'm also giving them a height of 116, but I'm giving them a left position of 10 pixels and a top position of 10 pixels, a border of 2. So I've got to add these to my left. That's 196, and then 4 is 200. So basically, again, because of that box model, remember we add up the padding, the border, the margin, and that what actually makes up the entire size. So this is actually going to work out to be our 210 pixels. I'm adding a 2 pixel solid black border around it. I'm giving it a line height of 116 pixels, and I'm actually matching the line height to the height of our element. And the reason being is I want my text to center in that. So I'm setting my line height, since I know I've got a single line of text, I'm setting the line height at 116. This way my font, my 24-point font size will center in the center of that. Giving it a font weight of normal, a font color of black, and a text line of center in this box. I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. Let me scroll down just a bit. Good time to pause if you need to type all this in. I'm going to go ahead and save all the changes, refresh my browser window. And you'll see now we're starting to see a group of menus. That's what this is right now. They're all grouped together, and they're all smashed together on top of one another. But we're starting to build now what's going to become our slides. Keep in mind, the only reason these appear so small, again, is because we've got our translate Z at -288. We're 288 pixels behind our center point. You'll see what I mean as we move forward with this exercise. All right, so the first thing I want to do, let's go ahead and do a save as. I want to go ahead and save this as example_4, because again, we're going to start making some more changes to our file. And I want to go in and reload example_4. Excellent. Now let's continue working with our styling and start to work on the menu items themselves. So we're actually going to start working now on the slides themselves that are going to make up our carousel. We'll start setting up the rotating plates that will become the carousel itself. This carousel has 5 panels, and again, that's because we've set it up with 5 different divs. Each panel gets an equal distribution of the carousel, so each panel would be rotated 72 degrees. And the way I got that is that we have 360 degrees in a circle. If I take 360 and divide it by 5, I've got 72 degrees that we're actually going to use for its rotation. So let's go ahead and add the following styling to our style sheet. I'm going to do these one at a time so we can talk through them, but I'm going to come right down below where I've got my carousel div, and I'm going to put my first one in. So I'm in the carousel ID, and I've got this div with nth child, and what that means is the number of the child of the div. So I'm actually looking at this particular div ID because this is the first child, the div that's the first child of carousel. I'm giving it a background color of HSLA, and we talked about these colors once before in an earlier tutorial. I've got hue, saturation, and luminous plus alpha. So I've got 0, 75%, 50%, and 0.9 for alpha. I'm going to go ahead and save that change. I'm going to refresh my body window, and you'll see now that we've actually got our first child has now picked up that background color that we've given it inside of that styling that we've just put into our document. Let me go ahead and put in the rest of these, and then I'll pause so you can actually type them. I actually wanted to explain how they worked first. So I'm going to come right below this. We're going to put in the remaining divs. So again, now we're addressing, let me go ahead and clean up my formatting here. So now I'm addressing the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth divs. And you'll notice I've incremented each one of these by 72. And I didn't have to do that, by the way. 72 was the actual number that we used, that we're going to use for our offset. So I figured, what the heck, I'd just use that on my hue also, because it'll give me different colors. I've left my saturation and luminous the same. I've changed the hue, so it's going to give me a different color in each one of my panels. And I've set my alpha at 0.09 for each panel. I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. I'm going to refresh my browser window. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up just a little. Good time to pause if you want to type that in. And while you're typing that in real quick, the end child selector in CSS, the end child with the number selector matches every element that is that number child regardless of its type. So because I put a div here, I'm actually looking for the div that's number 1, that's the number 1 child of this carousel. So it's looking for the first div that's a child of the carousel. So I'm looking right here. And the same thing with the number 2. Now I'm looking for the second div that's a child of carousel. So now I'm targeting this one. And that's how that nth child works. It's a pretty cool selector. I use it quite a bit when I'm styling. I just wanted to explain it because I wasn't certain if you'd seen it before. It's an excellent way to target children of an element that share a common element ID. And the fact that these all share the div ID, and I didn't give them individual class names, this is an excellent way to target them individually without having to give them to class names. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do is we actually want to start setting up the rotation for our actual carousel. So I'm going to come in and put in my first one. So I'm going to come right below where we set up here, and I'm going to paste in place carousel. Again, I'm using this div nth child. So again, I'm looking at that first child, that first div that makes up our child. I'm going to do a transform rotate Y. I want to rotate it 0 degrees, and I want the translate Z to be 288 pixels. So now what was originally set up at minus, now I'm going to bring this one to the front. So when I save this change, I'm actually going to go ahead and put these on separate lines. I think it will make it easier to follow that way. I thought maybe a single line would be good, but I think it would be easier if I kept them on standard lines. I'm going to go ahead and save the change. You can go ahead and type that in if you want. When I update my browser now, refresh my browser window, we're actually going to see that first child now come to the front and fill in, because we've rotated him on the z-axis. We've brought him forward. Let's go ahead and refresh the browser window, and boom, there comes that first menu that we're going to see inside of our carousel. I'm going to do the same thing with my number 2. So I'm going to come right down below, and I'm going to do this for the number 2 div that's actually inside here. Let's go ahead and clean up our formatting a little bit. But now with this one, I'm going to actually rotate the Y. I want to rotate it 72 degrees. And again, we pick 72 degrees because we have 5 slides. And if I take 360 degrees and divide it by 5, I get 72 degrees. And again, I'm going to pull it forward with translate Z, 288 pixels. Rotate Y 72 degrees. Let's go ahead and save that change, refresh my browser window. And now you can see that second child appear inside of our carousel. I'm going to do the same thing with my third. So I'm going to come right below that. This one we're going to address the third child, that third div. And again, same thing we've done in the past. I'll list them instead of 72 degrees because now I want 72 times 2. I have 144 degrees. So again, I've got 144 degrees. I've 288 degrees pixels off the translate Z. It's taking it from that center point and moving it out. And it's rotating on the Y 144 degrees. This will be the one that's right behind here. Save the change, refresh the browser window, and you can actually, you just barely could see it poke up in the back. Actually, let's make these 0.8. That might make it a little bit easier for you to see what's happening in the background back there. It's pretty soon we'll be rotating through them anyway, and you'll be able to see them all. But I think it'd be better if you could actually see what's occurring as we're building this to give you an idea of why we're putting in these degrees and what we're doing with this translate Z. Save the change, refresh the browser window, it makes it a little bit more transparent. Now let's go ahead and do the fourth child. I'm going to come down right below where we did the third div. We're going to do the fourth div. Again, let me go ahead and clean up this code. I'll pause, by the way, once we get all these in, so you can actually catch up and get all this stuff typed in. So now we're actually setting up that fourth. We're rotating the Y 216 degrees. And again, all I've done is taken 144 and added 72 to it. Got 216 degrees. My 288 degrees, or my 288 pixels off my Z is actually pushing it out. You're going to see that one appear right up back here. When we refresh the browser window, there it is. And now the last one's going to be the one on this side as we do number 5. We're actually going to bring that one right along the side. And again, same thing, div, the fifth div child inside that carousel. This is 288 degrees. Again, I've taken that 216, I've added 72 degrees to it. And I'm taking my 288 pixels and pushing it from that translate Z, save the change, refresh my browser, and now we've actually built the carousel. We have all 5 of our carousels. Obviously nothing's working. We haven't attached our JavaScript yet, but now we've actually got the carousel built. We just have to actually add the interaction. What I meant by the Z-axis, let's go ahead to this back one, and let's go ahead and set this at 0. Because I actually want you to see what the Z-axis is and how it moves it on this line. That's the 0 point right there. So if I could turn this sideways, you'd actually see that this guy here was lined up with the edge and the edge of this. And once we set the JavaScript, I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to actually hook it up because I want you to see how these are adjusting, how the z-axis works, because this wasn't as easy to do in the cube as it is to do with the carousel. It's a lot easier to see it. So I'm actually going to set it up once we get in the next portion where we actually set up our JavaScript and we can actually get our carousel to move. All right, so I'm going to continue to march with our demonstration. The next thing I want to do, and actually it's the last thing I want to do, I'm just going to take our file. Let's go ahead and do a save as. I want to save this as example_5. So we're actually going to make some changes to our HTML file now. And if you remember from when we first started the demonstration, I told you about this JS directory where I've built this little carousel file, and this is our utility file, the very same utility file that we used inside of our cube. We're actually going to be using in this one. It's got the modernizer script, and it's got the additional scripts that we need for modernizer for our carousel. And then in this file, this is the actual carousel file that I wrote for our carousel to work. I'm going to go ahead and load it so you can actually see what's in it. It's a very small JavaScript file. And again, it just gives us the functionality to allow us to navigate the carousel using our buttons. And that's what it's actually looking for. It's looking for the nav buttons that we actually have set up right down here. It's looking for the previous and next. And that's basically what it's doing. It's data incrementing. We actually talked about that here, where we do this data increment, -1 or +1. Well, that's what this JavaScript file is doing. It's actually taking that and then moving our file. But in order for this to work, I actually have to attach it to my HTML file, just as we had done in the previous tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my script files, and right below my HTML tag, I am going to paste my script files in place to bring in that utility JavaScript and that carousel JavaScript file. I'm going to go ahead and save that change. I'm going to go ahead and refresh my browser window, make sure that we're actually loaded up on 5. Refresh my browser window, and now when I hit this next button, the next button, you can actually see us rotating through this carousel. Pretty neat. Now what I want to do is I want to demonstrate to you what I was talking about with this z-axis, because you'll be able to see it a lot better now. I'm going to actually take number 1 and put this to 0 and save this change. And I'm going to update the browser window. And when I rotate, you'll notice now that that's the 0 point of our z. It actually, now these are still at our 288 pixels because it's pushed them out. But our number 1 slide is at 0 pixels because we didn't. So if I actually were to make it 100 pixels, it's going to push it 100 pixels forward of the center. You'll notice it came forward a little bit, and now we're a little farther forward in here. 200 pixels would actually take us right to the edge of this. So I'm going to change it to 200, save that change, refresh my browser window, and now you'll notice we're right at the edge of the line. But we're still sitting far below, because you'll notice here, this is my 288, this is my 200. So if I make this 288 now, it's going to come out and be even with everything else. Now keep in mind, as soon as I refresh the browser window, it's going to jump back to be number 1, but now when I rotate it, you'll see it's right there where it should be. And that's what translate Z is. It starts at the 0 point. So it starts at the 0 point for our translate, which is right in the center of this carousel. And that's where it is at 0. That's why when we were up here, when we were at -288, remember we actually started out with -288? Remember how small the slides were? They all seem crunched together. Well, watch what happens when I make it -288. It pushes it all the way to the back. Now it's actually sitting in the gap between my third and fourth slide, because we're at 288. And look how small it is in the background, way back yonder, because that's how small they all were at once. And I just wanted you to be aware of how this z-index works. It's kind of cool. And by adjusting not only the z-index, but by adjusting our degrees, like if I were to come in here, I have this set at 72 degrees. So my second slide now, that's 72 degrees. What if I made this 45 degrees? Save the change. What should the slide do? Based on what we know about a circle, this purple slide should move closer to the menu 1. I'm sorry, the yellow slide should move closer to menu 1. So it was at 72 originally. Save that change. That's 72. If I make it 45, it moves it closer to our menu 1. And that's what's determining where these are positioned inside of our grid. Now keep in mind, because of the fact I don't have this spaced evenly now I don't have that slide falling in the center of my document. So I'd actually need to update that, bring it back, and now everything's back into the way I've set it up for our 5-slide carousel. Very cool little utility. And also, as we did with the cubes, keep in mind, I could put anything in these divs. I don't have to just have text. I could have some graphics, I could have some text, I could have links. So if I wanted to make this a menu system, a true menu system, I could have like a little PHP icon in here and have it linked to a PHP section of my website. Or I could have a Flash icon in here and have that linked to the Flash section of my website. And just by turning this carousel and then selecting the link, it would jump to another portion of the website. So there's a lot of cool things we can do with carousels. In the next tutorial, we're actually going to build one that's a little more complex. It's actually going to have 9 frames to it. Be a little more complex, a little more fun. We're going to play a little bit with making it a little bigger, putting in some graphics. And again, kind of what we did with the cube. But I just want you to get comfortable with how these transform elements work in CSS3 because they give us a ton of power that we didn't have up until the changes that we have now for CSS3. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.